Hello, my name is Gordon Evans, and welcome to my presentation. My presentation is entitled Teaching Peace Through the Principles. And of course, these are the principles of peace and justice as taught to us through the Peace and Justice Institute in collaboration with Valencia College in Orlando, Florida. So, my purpose in this exercise is to educate everyone who's listening in terms of wanting to who's interested in educating others about the principles of peace and justice. Ultimately, we know that our world is flawed. We know that there's a lot that's wrong and there are many things that are going on. But peace is what we should all strive for. And through proper application of the principles that I'm going to discuss today, we should be able to reach the goal that we strive for. So, there are 13 principles of peace and justice. I'm going to go through them all. Please try to follow along. So, the first principle that I want to talk about, and this is extremely important, in many ways, this principle is the foundation for peace and justice education. It is principle one is creating a hospitable and accountable community. If we know that there is strife in the world, there are people that are maybe hostile or are not interested in engaging with us, we need to understand that that's only on the surface. Underneath that is fear. Fear is generally the root of anger, it is the root of hostility. And oftentimes, fear is simply a natural reaction to not knowing what's going on. It's a reaction to the unknown. So when people come to us, and in our role as facilitators of peace and justice, we need to be open minded and be willing to make them comfortable, to help them to understand that we're not the enemy, that we're trying to help, that we're trying to make their life better, and by doing so, make the lives of everyone around them better. And that's really the biggest part of what it means to create a hospitable and accountable community. We also need to hold each other accountable. We need to make sure that we're doing our best and that we are striving to live these principles in our affairs and especially in our efforts to educate people. Um, it's very important and really is the foundation for any kind of teaching or any education that we're trying to provide in terms of civics or in terms of um, you know interpersonal communication skills or anything like that. So it really boils down to wanting to reach as many people as possible and doing whatever it takes to make that happen, which includes sometimes making ourselves uncomfortable for the sake of others. It's important to understand that, you know, if, for example, if I'm in the room with someone who maybe has extremely different views than me, say, for example, maybe they're a neo Nazi skinhead or something like that, most people's normal reaction would be to be put off by that. Um, but for me, as someone who is striving to internalize these principles and to then use them for good, for me, it would be important to understand that maybe on the surface, me and this individual are diametrically opposed, but there's more common ground than we think. So, having that positive attitude is really a major step and is very important in this work. The second principle, and equally as important as the first, is listening deeply. What do we mean when we say listening deeply? Listening deeply involves doing simply that, listening. There's no judgments. As Principle 3 states on the screen, there's no advice. We're not here for that. In that moment, in this part of the process, my job is simply to listen, to let you empty your heart, to open up, and to share whatever it is you feel you need to share. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to blame or to push an agenda or an ideology. I'm simply here to listen and to be there with my presence. The the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh stated, quote, "Deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of another person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose: to help him or her to empty his heart. Deep listening helps us to recognize the existence of wrong perceptions in the other person and wrong perceptions in us." Close quote. I included this quote in this presentation because I believe it's very powerful. I think that, as he states, the goal is to let the other person completely relieve themselves of their burden. It's a very selfless act. As teachers of peace and justice, our goal should be to help alleviate the suffering of others. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Nothing about this process is easy. In many ways, it can make us uncomfortable. Someone is unloading their burden, and we're accepting it. But we choose to do that because we understand that this process, this goal, and this life that we're striving for is something that is bigger than us. We are just one piece of the machinery, and we need to play our part. Listening is something that we're not accustomed to in our culture. Generally, we're very anxious to want to speak. When someone else is speaking, we're already planning what we're going to say next. We're planning a retort or a rebuttal. We're trying to poke holes in their logic. Well, you said this, but I disagree. It's very, very selfless, and it's very rare for people to be willing to sit down and take the time to listen without any preconditions, without any judgment, and only for the sake of helping someone else. As teachers of peace and justice, and as messengers of this work, it's important that we not always think about ourselves first. And it's very difficult to do, especially in our Western society. And no one's perfect, but that's why we're here. So the fourth and the fifth, they go together. Practice asking honest and open questions and give space for unpopular answers. So this is part of a dialogue, right? As part of the effort to teach other people, we come to them, we do our best to make them feel comfortable, and then we listen. We listen and we give them space to say whatever it is that they need to say. Some of these things we may not agree with, and some of these things may be hurtful or uncomfortable for us to hear. Take, for example, my hypothetical neo-Nazi. He may say some pretty hurtful things. But again, we need to have that understanding that his hurtful comments come from a place of internal hurt that he is feeling. If he is feeling hurt or scared, or maybe just misunderstanding certain things, it's a common reaction to lash out. And for us, we can't take that personally. This isn't about me, it's about that other person. They're going through something, they're suffering. Their suffering is causing them to react like this. And as someone who recognizes that, my job is not to react to that suffering in a negative way. Rather, it's to react to it in a way that's healthy, that allows them to express their feelings, but then also to be able to ask follow-up questions and to try to help them through this process of education to be able to understand and to learn and possibly see the error in their logic. This is true for people that hold maybe racist or anti-Semitic views. which seems to be becoming more popular here in the West, especially in the US. Um, these things that they believe are factually wrong. They're not based on science, and they're not based on reason. Rather, they're based on xenophobia and tribalism, hurtful rhetoric that they've grown up, being surrounded by. That's just kind of become internalized. Um, so it's important through this process, as educators, to be able and willing to give space for their answer, but then also to challenge it gently. Right? We don't want confrontation. We don't want to build those walls back up. We want to help these people along so that they can learn through their own work that their belief is flawed. We want collaboration, and we want trust, and most importantly, we want equality within the group. So the next couple principles, again, they go together. Very important. And again, it's important for people who are taking this class with me to understand that this is an ongoing process. Just like the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's not going to happen in a day, right? This is an ongoing dialogue. This is an ongoing process that we need to work through and understand that if we're talking about making real, genuine, lasting societal change, we cannot expect this to be done quickly. Rome was not built in a day, and peace cannot be attained in a day, unfortunately. So, as part of this ongoing process, the next principle is respect the silence. Silence is uncomfortable. It's something that we're not used to. When someone says something, especially something that we disagree with, we tend to want to jump back into the conversation. Well, hold on, you're wrong about X, Y, and Z, right? And that's our normal reaction, and that's fine as long as we recognize that that's a flaw. That's something that we need to work through. But we need to be willing and able to just take a moment to think more deeply about what was said, right? And again, to understand and respect where it's coming from. Someone using incendiary rhetoric, it's hard for us to listen to that. But when we hear it, take a moment when you're interacting with people in your own life. Take a moment to just be silent and to think. Think deeply about what has been said. Consider why it was said. Right? Don't just immediately jump back into the conversation or try to rebut what the other person is saying. It's not helpful. It makes them defensive, and then usually communication breaks down. The next principle is suspending judgment. We already spoke about this already, but it's important to kind of revisit it for a second. Judgment is something that we all have. We all see the world through our own lens of perception. We all have our own biases and assumptions that we bring to the table. No one's perfect, right? We all see the world through a lens. It's important to recognize that. Even though you may strongly believe that you're right, you may not be right, right? And that's okay. That's part of the human experience. But it's important to recognize what you bring to the table and just take a step back. And it's the same with the next one, which is identify assumptions. We all have assumptions and internalized judgments and biases. You just got to work through it. And really, most importantly, through this process, be supportive. Give support to the person. Understand that this is not easy for them. It may not be easy for you, but it's also not easy for them, especially if they're sharing and their biases or their beliefs are being challenged, right? It's not easy. So principle 9 is speak your truth. This is where you now have the opportunity to speak, right? You have the opportunity, you've listened deeply, you've heard what the other person said, you've thought about it, you've contemplated, you sat in silence, you tried to work on abolishing or at least kind of temporarily removing your own biases, but now it's time to respond. It's very important that you do this in a way that is gentle, but also firm. You want to make sure that the person understands, hopefully at this point, they understand that where their harmful beliefs are and how their actions are not cohesive, um, and they're not conducive to facilitating peace. You may be talking to someone who says, "Well, I hate this population," right? For whatever reason. You've asked the questions, you've tried to go through with them and help them understand, well, isn't that contradictory, or that doesn't make sense, or right? But now is your chance to come back with facts. You say that you hate this population, but you know, it's true that we don't have any control over that, or um, all of these things that you've stated are factually inaccurate. Um, I have the statistics to prove them. Whatever. Now is your chance to kind of bring out your proverbial weapons, right? And to use your reason and to try to help people to work through some of those negative beliefs. The next principle is when things get difficult, turn to wonder. This is similar to respecting the silence in the sense that you want to take time to really kind of think about and appreciate where the other person is coming from. But you also want to wonder and understand that when things are heated or when they're difficult, that you want to take a break and you want to consider the source, right? We've spoke about this earlier, but it's important. You want to consider the source and understand, I'm trying to educate this person. He's not responding well to it. Why? What can be done differently, right? Why does he feel that way? Why is he lashing out? And then take a moment to kind of adjust your strategy so that you can interact in a more healthy manner. And principle 11, which is the next one, is practice slowing down. It's very important in our lives. We tend to believe that we need instant gratification. We have to do things now. Everything has to be done now. And we're always in a rush. We're in a rush to get to work. We're in a rush to come home. We're in a rush to go to do this. And we're in a rush to do that. And sometimes it's better to just slow down, take a break, understand that this is a process. And it's a gradual process. It's not something that happens overnight. Um, and that understanding allows us to really, you know, be able to be in a good place emotionally when we're dealing with people that maybe are not willing, at least at first, to accept what we're trying to offer them, which is civic education and a better life, essentially, by practicing the principles of peace and justice. It's something that's important, but not everybody necessarily sees it that way. And that's okay. We all have the right to our opinion, but it's important to just take a break, not let things get out of control, and respect the process. So, finally, the last two principles are very important, and they're important things to remember. Principle 12 is all voices have value. And this is true, I think, in two ways. Voices have value in the sense that we all make mistakes, so we're all equal. Um, we're all equally on the same page in terms of being human. But I think also all voices have value can also be seen in a positive light. Everyone is unique, and everyone brings something different to the table. Your experience is not mine, and vice versa. So we should be not only respecting that, but celebrating it. Diversity is a virtue, and it's something that we should strive for in our daily lives, in any kind of activism or any kind of groups that we're participating in. It's very important. And especially as facilitators of peace education, it is our job to respect diversity and to understand that, you know what, even though this person may be someone who I disagree with on certain things, he's a person, he's a human being, and he has a unique life experience that I have not had, and that makes him special. So it's very important to remember that. And finally, the last principle is maintain confidentiality. This is huge. Anytime we are in a vulnerable situation and we are willing to open ourselves to share our experience with others, we have the right to expect that everything that was said will remain there. Confidentiality is of the utmost importance anytime you're in a situation like this. And as facilitators, it's our job to make sure that we respect the confidentiality of anyone that we're interacting with, and that we make sure that they know that so they can be comfortable to continue to share with us and continue to grow with us and continue to walk this path together. If someone feels unsafe, they're going to withdraw. They're going to become guarded. The walls are going to go back up. And we don't want that. That'll undo all the progress that we've made. So it's very important to just respect the process and make sure that they know that with us, they're safe and that we appreciate them for trusting us. So ultimately, the goal of peace and justice education is to strive for a better world. We look around us every day and we see things that we don't like. We see things that are bad. We see violence, war, genocide, ethnic cleansing. There's a lot of bad things, but even not on a macro scale, but on a micro scale, we see conflict in our lives. We see road rage. We see people fighting on TV or stealing or robbing or killing. In many ways, the world is a scary place. And it's difficult for us to imagine that a better world is possible. Not just a world with a lack of violence, but a world where we all strive to work together. Positive peace. That's what the definition is. Where not just violence doesn't exist, but we also come together as one to proactively build each other up, to be there for each other, to recognize that even though we're different, we're all one human family. And this is the only planet that we've got. This is our home. We have to take care of it, and we have to take care of each other. Because if we don't, then there's not going to be a future for any of us, especially our children. In many ways, the world really is in our hands. And it's something that, whether we like it or not, it's our duty to protect. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And as facilitators of peace education, understand that this mission is bigger than the rest of us. It's bigger than all of us. We are always here for each other. You're never alone. One way or the other, everything's going to be okay. Again, thank you for your time, and you have a wonderful day.